down. The Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Human Services will come to order. Welcome, everyone. I note that a quorum is present. I note for the subcommittee that Ms. Omar of Minnesota is permitted to participate in today's hearing with the understanding that her questions will come only after all members of the Civil Rights and Human Services Subcommittee on both sides of the aisle who are present have had an opportunity to question the witness. The subcommittee is meeting today to hear testimony on examining the policies and priorities of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service. This is a hybrid hearing pursuant to House Resolution 8 and the regulations thereto. All microphones, both in the room and on the platform, will be kept muted as a general rule to avoid unnecessary background noise. Members and the witness will be responsible for unmuting themselves when they are recognized to speak or when they wish to seek recognition. When members wish to speak or seek recognition, they should unmute themselves and allow a pause of 2 seconds to ensure the microphone picks up their speech. I also ask that members please identify themselves before they speak. Members who are participating in person should not be logged onto the remote platform to avoid feedback, echoes, and distortion. Members participating remotely shall be considered present in the proceeding when they are visible on camera, and they shall be considered not present when they are not visible on camera. The only exception to this is if they are experiencing technical difficulty and inform committee of such difficulty. If any member experiences technical difficulty during the hearing, you should stay connected on the platform, make sure you are muted, and use your phone to immediately call the committee's IT director, whose number was provided in advance. Should the chair need to step away for any reason, Representative Adams or another majority member is hereby authorized to assume the gavel in the chair's absence. To adhere to the committee's 5-minute rule, staff will be keeping track of time using the committee's digital timer on the remote platform. For members participating in person, the timer will be broadcast in the committee room on the television monitor as part of the platform gallery view and visible in its own thumbnail window. The committee room timer will not be in use. For members participating remotely, this will be visible in the gallery view in its own thumbnail on the remote platform. Members are asked to wrap up promptly when their time has expired. Finally, although the recent guidance from the Office of the Attending Physician has made mask wearing optional at this time, please know that we have in our midst, both at the member and staff levels, individuals who are immunocompromised and or who have immediate family members who are immunocompromised, as well as who are not vaccinated either due to medical reasons or because they have not yet been able to get vaccinations for their children under the age of 5. Therefore, the committee strongly recommends that masks continue to be worn out of concern for the safety of the unvaccinated and immunocompromised committee members and staff and their families. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, opening statements are limited to the chair and the ranking member. This allows us to hear from our witnesses sooner and provides all members with adequate time to ask questions. I recognize myself now for the purpose of making an opening statement. Today, we are meeting to discuss the Biden-Harris administration's priorities for federal child nutrition programs and the steps they have taken to prevent and address child hunger. We can all agree that children need healthy meals to learn and grow. Despite this consensus, too many children still do not have access to healthy food. In 2018, nearly 1 in every 7 households with children struggled to put enough food on the table. And as we all know, the pandemic exacerbated this crisis. Just weeks into the pandemic, more than 1 in every 3 households with children and nearly half of all mothers with young children struggled with food insecurity. A year later, in April 2021, food shortages among households with children fell by 42%. This was not by happenstance. Congress and the Biden-Harris administration acted decisively to deliver relief to families and prevent millions of children from going hungry. One of the first relief packages The Families First Coronavirus Response Act included provisions based on my bipartisan COVID-19 Child Nutrition Response Act, which gave the USDA critical flexibility to allow schools and community partners to deliver meals to families and offer free meals to all children through the Summer Food Service Program. The bill also created the Pandemic EBT, or PEBT, so low-income families who could not physically get to the school meal site could still receive funding to help their children. Research indicates that the PEBT program has lifted as many as 3.9 million children out of hunger. I recently visited Chapman Elementary School in Portland, Oregon during the lunch hour, and I helped serve meals to students. It was an important reminder that school nutrition staff have been tirelessly working to get meals to kids, even with inflation and supply chain challenges. And hearing directly from an enthusiastic group of third graders about why it's important for every student to have access to healthy meals was an important reminder that our actions here in this committee room have tremendous consequences for the families and children we represent. I'm excited that today the House will vote on the bipartisan Keep Kids Fed Act to extend flexibilities from the Families First Act and allow schools to continue serving children healthy meals. Without congressional action, many of these useful flexibilities will expire on June 30th, potentially stripping millions of children's access to school meals. Unfortunately, we know that some of the most vulnerable families in our communities are facing additional challenges. After Abbott Nutrition, one of the country's largest formula manufacturers, recalled many of its formula products, families across the country with young children struggled to find formula they needed. In response, Congress passed the Access to Baby Formula Act to make sure that low-income families that use WIC benefits can continue purchasing safe infant formula in times of crisis, such as supply chain disruptions. In Oregon, this legislation provides more than 10,000 infants with better access to formula. And despite the accomplishments we have made, we have much more work ahead to keep children from going hungry. We must provide urgent relief to help families address the rising costs of everyday goods and deliver sustained support to families to help finally eliminate child hunger. To that end, House Democrats and a handful of Republicans passed the Lower Food and Fuel Costs Act, which will shore up the food and agriculture supply chain and lower the cost of goods at the grocery store. I will note that most of my Republican colleagues opposed this legislation. I asked my colleagues critical of our attempts to lower costs, not to just oppose our efforts, but please work with us and offer solutions to help families put food on the table. I also invite my colleagues to join Democrats in passing a comprehensive, science-driven federal child nutrition reauthorization. Regrettably, the underlying federal laws that authorize federal child nutrition programs expired in 2015. Reauthorization is critical to addressing child hunger, and I hope my Republican colleagues will join Democrats to pass a comprehensive federal child nutrition reauthorization. The lessons learned from our response to COVID-19 reaffirm that when we invest in child nutrition programs, we keep children from going hungry. That's a good investment in the short term and the long term. And I want to reiterate a simple fact. To eliminate child hunger, we must deliver these sustained investments in our child nutrition programs. Thank you, Administrator Long, for all you do for our nation's children. Together, I'm confident we can help children reach their full potential. And I now recognize distinguished ranking member for the purpose of making an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hope your health is recovering, and look forward to seeing you back in the chair in the office soon. So all the best to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Committee Republicans understand the importance of ensuring children are well fed during the school day. And we recognize the importance of reaching students that are truly in need with the benefits of school-provided nutrition programs. However, as we exit this pandemic, creating permanent changes to school nutrition programs without first determining if such changes are needed is nonsensical. Before these programs are reauthorized, we need to validate which aspects of these programs work and which don't. The majority party has used the pandemic as a springboard to expand federal control, thereby increasing spending into seemingly every aspect of American life, including school lunch programs. Prior to the pandemic, child nutrition programs provided approximately 30 million lunches and 14 million school breakfasts every school day. And the need to assess these programs in the post-pandemic era remains. We saw Congress and the previous administration move quickly to help ensure needy students had access to food and did not miss a meal. But we need to make sure these programs move forward under normal operation. Taxpayer funds should be used to help students in real need. Allowing wealthy families to take advantage of school lunch programs is not responsible use of taxpayer dollars. Instead, we should look for ways to strengthen the programs by learning the lessons of the pandemic from people operating under the nutrition program's rules. There should be concentrated efforts from USDA, states, and schools to help parents transition back to regular operations, including the filling out of applications to determine free and reduced price eligibility. This also means not overburdening the programs with new challenges. Once again, the administration is looking to overhaul the meal pattern regulations with more federal control. The last time the Secretary did this, the final rule added billions in taxpayer expenses to schools and led to such significant challenges that some of the requirements had to be waived just to make the programs work. It's just not right to increase costs, add complexity, or pursue pet projects. This should be a time the USDA should listen to the local folks on the ground and learn from the challenges the pandemic taught us. We're also concerned about the administration's recent Title IX guidance. We're concerned the administration plans to hold school lunch programs hostage unless schools capitulate to controversial gender policies. Boys and girls get hungry. As school nutrition relates to the gender, that's the only guideline we need. The nutrition of children should not be used as a tool to advance the Biden administration's progressive agenda. This all underscores why we need more transparency from the administration about how this new guidance will apply to nutrition programs and how it will impact faith-based providers participating in the programs. The Biden administration has already targeted faith-based entities in other areas. I'd hate to see children suffer because of this administration's vindictive and biased policies. Lastly, this administration must insert some common sense intelligence to the baby formula shortage issue, or at least get out of the way of the market. For the week of May 22 to 29, the out-of-stock rate for baby formula was 73.5%. Yes, that's 73.5% in America for baby formula. These are not rocket components or microprocessors, it's baby formula, and it's unacceptable. If we can't solve this problem, heaven help us on issues with complexity. Parents and caregivers across the country shouldn't have to wake up in the morning not knowing if they're going to be able to feed their babies. USDA doesn't have control over the FDA, but it's imperative the administration and its agencies work together to solve it. I'm glad we were able to pass H.R. 7791, the Bipartisan Access to Baby Formula Act, but this bill alone will not solve the crisis. We must secure our baby formula supply chain so this never happens again. In the meantime, this committee would like to hear from the Biden administration on how this crisis has impacted WIC participants. Americans need answers. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Fulcher. Without objection, all other members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m. on July the 7th. I will now introduce the witness. Ms. Cindy Long is the administrator of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service. She previously served as the Food and Nutrition Service. She previously served the Food and Nutrition Service in other roles, including Deputy Administrator for FNS Child Nutrition Programs. Ms. Long earned an MPA in Public Policy and Economics from Princeton University's School of Public and International Affairs and a BA in Economics from the University of Notre Dame. Ms. Long, you are recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you, Chair Bonamici.
Excuse me, Ms. Long, before I begin, I do need to say that we appreciate the witness for participating today. We look forward to your testimony. Let me remind the witness that we have read your written statement. It will appear in full in the hearing record, and pursuant to Committee Rule 8D in committee practice, you are asked to limit your oral presentation to a 5-minute summary of your written statement. Before you begin, please remember to unmute your microphone, which I know you did. During your testimony, staff will be keeping track of time and the timer will be visible to you at the witness table. Please be attentive to time and wrap up when your time is over. We will let you make your presentation before we move to member questions. And when answering a question, please remember to unmute your microphone. The witness is aware of her responsibility to provide accurate information to the subcommittee, and therefore we will now proceed with her testimony. My apologies. Again, Administrator Long, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair Bonamici, Ranking Member Fulcher, and members of the subcommittee for inviting me to join you today. I'm Cindy Long, and I'm the administrator of USDA's Food and Nutrition Service. Before I start, I want to thank you all for your commitment to FNS programs and to America's children. I want to focus my limited time on several current challenges facing WIC and child nutrition, and I hope we'll have a chance to talk more about all the other efforts underway to strengthen the programs for the long term as well. As members of this subcommittee are well aware, WIC and the child nutrition programs are highly effective and impactful. For example, there is strong evidence that WIC participation leads to positive outcomes: fewer infant deaths, fewer premature births, and increased birth weights. It saves money on healthcare costs and also leads to better health and academic outcomes for children. Yet the share of eligible families participating in WIC has been declining over the past decade, and it currently stands at only about 50%. That's why, with the investment that Congress made in the American Rescue Plan Act, we're infusing the program with resources to spur modernization and innovation that will help mothers and children for generations to come. We're committed to reversing the decline in participation and enhancing service delivery with a focus on improving equity and reducing health disparities. But top of mind for all of us and for families across the country is addressing the effect of the infant formula shortage for WIC families. From the moment that the FDA alerted us to the recall, USDA has been working day and night as part of an all-of-government response to ensure that WIC families have access to formula. Within 3 days, we issued over 100 waivers to allow WIC recipients to exchange formula and purchase alternatives. We continue to work with WIC state agencies and federal partners, most recently to ensure that WIC can benefit from the new supply coming in from overseas. We're very grateful to the committee for its leadership in passing the Bipartisan Access to Baby Formula Act, which has supported us in our current activities and will give us authority in the future to respond to emergencies. We will continue to work closely with our federal and private sector partners to prioritize WIC families in our response. Similarly, we are working hand in hand with our child nutrition partners to address the pressing challenges that they face. Since March of 2020, Congress provided USDA with wide latitude and resources for child nutrition programs, and we've deployed them to help operators continue to feed kids. We are very glad that children are back in school, but school meal programs do still face tremendous challenges caused by supply chain disruptions, cost increases, and labor challenges. They will undoubtedly need transitional support and flexibility. These programs typically operate on very slim margins, and they are struggling to afford everything they need in very tight markets. That's why we asked Congress to extend the waiver authority and provide schools with the financial and operational support they need to get through this upcoming transitional school year. So we're very pleased to see that bipartisan child nutrition is moving through Congress, which will provide some additional financial and operational support to schools and other program operators. This support will be extremely important, but there is no denying that it is nonetheless going to be a challenging year. Schools will be managing with fewer resources than they have in recent years while transitioning back to standard operations, including collecting and processing applications. There really has never been a more important time to rally around child nutrition programs. USDA is doing everything we can, using every authority we have to help schools navigate the transition, but it will take a collective effort by Congress, by USDA, by local school administrators, by parents and industry and others to maintain the strength of our school meals programs. I have worked in child nutrition for a very long time, but I'll say I have never been prouder to be associated with school meals than I have in recent years. Seeing school nutrition programs put themselves at risk, work tirelessly to ensure that children could access nutritious meals despite everything going on around them, it really tells you what these folks are made of. And they do it for a good reason. School meals play a pivotal role in our children's health and well-being. For many of the 30 million children that participate on an average day, school breakfast and lunch make up about half of what they eat. We know that nutritious meals can make a meaningful difference in kids' success at school. So when we move the needle on the nutrition quality of school meals, even a little bit, we can expect significant impacts for millions of children. There is so much more critically important work going on in WIC and child nutrition. We're updating the WIC food packages to reflect the latest evidence. We're engaging extensively with stakeholders to inform a long-term update on nutrition standards in school meals. And we're acting on several fronts to make WIC Online a reality. Despite the challenges in front of us, we will keep working to strengthen WIC and the child nutrition programs for the long term, because we know, without a doubt, how critical healthy food is for kids. So thank you again for having me, and I look forward to our dialogue.
Thank you, Administrator Long. Under Committee Rule 9A, we will now question the witness under the 5-minute rule. I will be recognizing subcommittee members in seniority order. Again, to ensure the members' 5-minute rule is adhered to, staff will be keeping track of time. Please be attentive to the time and wrap up when your time is over, and then remute your microphone. As chair, I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Administrator Long, the summer EBT program has been a lifeline for many families that cannot afford groceries for their children. But as it currently stands, the program will expire when the federal public health emergency ends. The Biden administration has proposed making summer EBT nationwide and permanent, which will do a lot to address food insecurities for families across the nation. Can you please highlight what summer EBT has meant to families that struggle to get food on the table during the summer months, and how FNS plans to address summer EBT in the future?
Sorry, I very much appreciate the question. As you note, summer EBT has been proven to have demonstrable impacts on reducing hunger in the summer. We had the opportunity for, about a decade prior to the pandemic to operate pilots in a number of states and in tribal communities and evaluate them rigorously. And we found that summer EBT can reduce hunger in the summer by approximately a third. It's an extraordinarily powerful program. We also know that current summer feeding programs, while extremely important and impactful to those who can access them, are not always available to children in the summer. You know, over the years, our ability to reach kids who qualify for free and reduced price meals in the summer has hovered somewhere between reaching 1 in 4 and 1 in 5. So clearly, the summer EBT model provides a path forward. Congress showed great foresight in including a summer EBT component to the pandemic EBT program that was stood up as part of COVID relief. And we've had the opportunity to operate nationwide summer program last year, and we are doing absolutely everything we can to encourage states to operate programs this year as well. I've personally have been really excited to see that the standing up of these summer EBT programs as part of pandemic EBT has really allowed us to see that statewide programs using this model are feasible, and they can work very well to support children. So we would be happy to work with Congress further to consider the future of the program.
Thank you, Administrator. The Child and Adult Care Food Program, CACFP, is an important part of our care economy. Late last year, I reintroduced the Bipartisan Early Childhood Nutrition Improvement Act, which would provide reimbursement for an additional meal or snack in CACFP, reduce paperwork, streamline program operations, and help childcare providers continue to operate effectively. Can you talk about the importance of strengthening and expanding CACFP, a program that currently serves almost 5 million children? And also, Administrator Long, in addition to passing the Early Childhood Nutrition Improvement Act, what could Congress do to improve CACFP and better support the child care infrastructure?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more about the importance of CACFP. I spent the first 5 years of my career at FNS working on the program. I know what an important support it is for childcare. And I also need to say that the Biden-Harris administration a top priority is supporting the expansion of high-quality childcare for working families, and CACFP is a tremendously important support for that. In terms of what we can do to further strengthen the program, I do want to acknowledge that the legislation that is being considered today would provide additional reimbursement for all CACFP meals. It would expand eligibility to the family daycare home part of the program in a more attractive way. That's an area where we have very concerningly seen a reduction over consistent reduction over time in the number of family daycare homes that participate in that program. And that's something I would welcome the opportunity to work with you to reverse.
Thank you, Administrator. And I have just another minute. I wanted to ask you about, I just recently visited a food co-op here in Oregon that's participating in the Double Up Food Bucks program. So thanks to the USDA, how is the Healthy Food Incentive Fund working to improve school nutrition programs?
Well, I would be happy to get back to you and provide a little bit more detail on how the Healthy Incentive Fund works to improve programs. But as you noted, one of the key activities under that fund is to help support programs that incentivize healthier eating, such as the Double Up program.
Thank you. And I'm going to set a good example for the rest of the committee members and yield back the balance of my time. I now recognize Ranking Member Fulcher for the purpose of questioning the witness.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Long, thank you for your testimony, for being here today. A couple of questions. First, the Secretary recently announced a $100 million program that was created to, I'll use a quote, create a new healthy food incentive fund. Can you talk to me about that a little bit? Admittedly, it kind of sounds like a slush fund, but talk to me about what's that being used for?
Yeah, the Healthy Food Incentive Fund that was recently announced as part of the broader food transformation effort is meant to support innovation in healthier school meals. Specifically, the program will be developed to recognize and support schools in serving healthier meals. It will include approaches like recognition, as well as actually providing resources for schools to serve healthier meals.
So Ms. Long, in your view, is that really happening? And if so, who are the decision makers? Are there locals involved with that? State officials, local officials, school officials? Is that working, and who is the deciding factors on making those decisions of where that money goes?
Well, the program has yet to be rolled out, so we will be announcing the specifics of how it will operate. But the intent is to, again, stand up a program that provides recognition to schools that show improvement or do something exemplary or innovative in support of healthier school meals. And it will also include resources that can go down to the local level to help with things like training, menu planning, things of that nature.
So as a follow-up to that, what is the plan on the decision makers? What's the process? Who will be making the decisions on where to spend that money?
Well, we are still working out the details, but our intent is to engage in a grant or a cooperative agreement with a partner that will help us operate this recognition and support program.
Third-party partner, private, public?
Again, some of the details are still to be worked out. We'd be happy to come back and brief on that when we've got when all of the details are made public.
Please do. Thank you. Another question: what programs does the USDA support that may have to do with promoting better feeding and nutrition at home?
Well, nutrition education is a significant part of all of our programs. I'll start with our Team Nutrition effort, which is kind of the brand of our nutrition education and support in school meals. We provide a variety of resources there, but it includes things like things that that children can bring home, coloring sheets and workbooks that they can use at school, but also are available for them to take home. In some aspects of that program, we would include things like after-school education, cooking classes. Obviously, because it's part of the school meals program, it is targeted towards children, but we strongly believe that the effects of those activities can spill over at home. For example, we often hear stories of children who are exposed to a new fruit or vegetable in their school meals program, and they go home and ask mom or dad to purchase that on the next trip to the grocery store.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to only have a minute and a half left, so just shifting gears for a moment. You probably heard my opening statement on the infant formula situation. I realize this is not the FDA, but I also know that there's a relationship there and there needs to be a working synergy in order to solve this. So that's risen to the top of concerns for a lot of Americans right now. And from our perspective, the FDA's failure to act with expediencies really has caused some panic, and we're struggling with that. What efforts, if any, is USDA taking on this in order to protect that industry or get that industry moving again and make sure we don't have this problem again?
Sorry. USDA is certainly part of the all-of-government effort, and our focus is ensuring that WIC families have adequate access to formula. Because of our communication, our close communication with FDA, within 24 hours of the recall, we were able to issue over 100 waivers to allow WIC families to do things like exchange formula, purchase alternative formula if necessary. We have continued to work closely with our partners across government in the recent weeks and months. And most recently, one of the things we've been focusing on is ensuring that WIC families have access to infant formula that is coming in from overseas.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Long. I'll just close my comments with just, I know you know this, but people are frustrated over this, and I keep harping on that this should not be that complex of a problem. So please continue the focus there. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Next, I recognize Dr. Adams. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see you and hope you continue to do well. Administrator Long, beyond offering nationwide waivers to help WIC participants dealing with the baby formula shortage, FNS also recently encouraged state agencies to work with their baby formula manufacturers to identify and implement temporary flexibility in their contracts. This will allow WIC participants to purchase alternate sizes, forms, or brands of infant formula during the ongoing shortage. I'm proud that my state of North Carolina and its contracted formula manufacturer are the first to have put this into action by agreeing to a contract modification that expands access to formula for WIC participants in the state. More states, I think, must follow the lead of North Carolina. So what is FNS doing to encourage state agencies and formula manufacturers to come to these agreements, and how can FNS do more to facilitate these types of agreements?
Thank you, Congresswoman. As you mentioned, one of the steps we have taken is to provide maximum flexibility and strongly encourage states to enter into the kind of agreements you were describing. We have worked closely with state agencies on those kinds of arrangements, and we agree that they have been extremely valuable. As I mentioned previously, we've taken other steps to support the availability of infant formula to WIC families, again, most recently including focusing on ensuring that they have access to the formula that's being brought in from overseas and issuing the waivers and flexibilities that are necessary for that to occur.
Okay, thank you. So Administrator Long, we've heard a lot of talk about FNS May 5th, 2022, the clarification regarding non-discrimination protections. And I'd like you to give us a minute or so to explain to the committee the agency's announcement.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to correct the record on this matter. Our underlying principle here is that we cannot allow discrimination to prevent anyone from accessing nutrition programs. So consistent with that principle, we issued the guidance that you mentioned to clarify that FNS programs must be open to all, regardless of gender. Some have incorrectly suggested that there is a link between this guidance and state laws unrelated to our programs involving things like gender identity in sports. This is not accurate. This guidance applies to federal nutrition assistance programs. Others have suggested that this guidance will result in a loss of program funding. Again, this guidance only applies to discrimination within FNS nutrition assistance programs, and in that context, our goal is always working the programs into compliance. Removing funding for nutrition programs is an absolute last resort for the obvious reason that we want kids to continue to keep getting fed.
Great. Okay. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, school nutrition, WIC, and child and adult care food program providers struggled to continue feeding children in a safe and accessible way. Waivers that Congress authorized under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So during the 2022 school year, 90% of schools used waivers. So what are some of the ongoing challenges you think families and school districts will face when it comes to feeding their children over the next few years? And what plans does FNS have to ease that transition as children go back to school?
Well, certainly, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we do see this as a transitional year, and we do expect that schools will have significant challenges as they scale back from the substantial additional financial and operational support that they have had during the pandemic. The kinds of challenges we expect to see involve just being able to consistently obtain the items and supplies and the labor they need to run the programs consistently. In terms of the kind of support FNS is providing, we are currently using the much more limited waiver authority we have under regular operations to provide some operational flexibility to allow, for example, schools to continue to operate grab-and-go programs if that's necessary due to COVID reasons, as a for example. We're going to continue to look at every tool in our toolbox as we go forward, and that will include working with state governors, local administrators, and encouraging others to use the resources and the support that they have to help these programs go forward.
Great, thanks very much, Madam Chair. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Next, I recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Dr. Fox. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Ms. Long, the pandemic-related waivers are finally on a path to ending. Up to this point, all we had seen from advocates and others is lobbying efforts to extend the waiver authority for another year. Can you please describe what actions FNS has taken to support a smooth transition for schools next year, returning to the regular operation?
Thank you for that question, Ranking Member Fox. As I mentioned, just previously, we have used the standard existing waiver authority that we have now to provide some operational administrative authorities on a state-by-state basis that would allow some flexibility in program operations. We are continuing to look at every resource we have, but the thing that I would stress is that we are extensively engaged in conversations with school program operators about what they need. We have been, trying to provide technical assistance around things like procurement and in how they can deal with things like not receiving bids and contract changes and the flexibilities they have to manage that. We have been strongly encouraging them to look for local and regional sources when they're struggling to obtain what they need from some of their historical relationships. So we will continue to use every tool in our toolbox to support schools going forward.
Are you encouraging them to tell you where you have put up roadblocks to their flexibility and to adapting?
Yeah, we're engaged in conversation with program operators and their representatives all the time, and I'll tell you, they don't hesitate to share with us where they think there are roadblocks. For example, as I was alluding to, they've because of some of the challenges they've had in the markets, we've heard a lot about procurement rules and what things that we need to do to make that more flexible or to make people more aware of the flexibilities they have, just as a for example.
Ms. Long, what role will school meals have in the White House Hunger Conference, and is FNS providing recommendations, and if so, what are those recommendations?
Well, certainly FNS is part of the broad government effort to plan the White House conference that you referenced. The specifics of what exactly the conference will cover and how FNS programs might fit in are still under development.
Well, will you promise to keep us in the loop as the conversation continues and provide any material to us that you submit to the conference?
Yeah, we are certainly happy to share with the committee information about the conference as it develops and is released.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ranking Member Fox. Next, I recognize Representative Hayes. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, Administrator Long, for being here with us today. I'm happy to hear your comments about WIC and the support of this administration. I introduced the Access to Baby Formula Act last month and was thrilled to see that it was signed into law so that we could close these gaps for WIC participants. As the formula crisis has shown us, we need to ensure that our food systems remain both local and resilient. The Farm to School programs provides grants to schools and education sites to support local food procurement, school gardens, and nutrition education. When kids get involved with growing or preparing their food, they're more likely to eat it. The Connecticut Department of Agriculture received an $82,000 grant for this program last year, enabling them to engage with 4 high-need school districts in my state. But still, too many interested districts cannot benefit from this successful program. Looking forward, how can Congress scale up programs like the Farm to School program so that more children have access to these opportunities? And what kind of impact will this have on children in underserved communities?
Well, first, Congresswoman, let me thank you for your leadership with respect to the Access to Baby Formula Act. With respect to Farm to School, I could not agree with you more about your enthusiasm about that program. I think it's one of the most important and impactful tools we have ever had to support healthy meals in schools and to engage children around the importance of health and food and nutrition. In terms of strengthening the program, I'm very happy to share that we very recently announced that as part of the department-wide initiative around strengthening the food chain, a $60 million investment in farm to school efforts that will go towards strengthening state infrastructure to support an ongoing strong farm to school programs.
Some technical
There's no
difficulties.
sound.
Stop the clock.
Yeah, is this better? No?
Stop
Recording
the
in
clock
progress.
until we fix this. Thank you.
Hello? No?
Can we tell if the issue is with the microphone in the room or is it the virtual platform?
The button's on.
Or not, to confirm, everyone, I have the Tanberg back online and on the grid.
Okay.
However, HRS, the Tanberg feed is muted currently. Just a notification to HRS, I have real-time video coming through from 2175 on the Tanberg feed. However, the Tanberg audio feed is muted.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience while we address this technical difficulty.
HRS, I can confirm, Tanberg feed is switching optimally. However, the audio feed from the Tanberg connection attendee is muted still. If you can unmute it, I believe that audio will then also arrive on the platform. Thank you.
Okay, we are having some problems with the live stream. We are suspended until it's back up. We're just pausing momentarily. Please stay on the platform. We hope this is resolved momentarily. It does look like Tanberg is now unmuted, Banyan. Should we try again?
Yes, panelist Administrator Long, if you can unmute your microphone and verbally confirm.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
ma'am.
we can hear
Thank
you. Okay, we
Administrator
are,
Long.
the
Chair
live
Bonamici.
stream is back up. We're going to continue where we left off.
Thank you. And I believe Congresswoman Hayes had just been asking about the Farm to School program. So I just want to point out a couple steps that we have recently taken, including we recently announced a $60 million investment to help support state-level infrastructure to support farm-to-school programs, to really help integrate them into the program as a permanent part of the program. In terms of looking forward, one thing that I'm very excited about is really expanding the concept more broadly beyond schools and into places like childcare settings, as well as doing a better job reaching communities we haven't served as well, such as tribal communities. I'm really happy to report that our grants to our farm to school grants to tribal organizations have increased quite dramatically in the last couple of years. The other thing I will just flag is we do have I think a bit of a rebuilding challenge with farm to school, in that it was very often supported and staffed by parents and volunteers who haven't been in the schools as much for the last couple of years. So we just want to keep supporting these programs at the local level, since that is really where the heart and soul of the programs are.
Well, thank you. I think you led right into my next question. I introduced bipartisan legislation for Scratch Cooked Meals for the Scratch Cooked Meals for Students Act. This would create a grant program to help schools transition and cook many of their meals from scratch, engage with local farmers, and have the school and community working together. But in order to do this, districts need to fundamentally change their food service programs, and by extension, their food service employees. What are the larger workforce development implications of scratch cooked meals in school? And how can we create, develop a workforce that will help to lift programs like this off the ground? And I'll just add, you're probably going to take up the rest of the time with your answer. So in regards to the White House Conference on Hunger, there are several listening sessions that are happening around the country right now so that people can engage to help build out the agenda. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on expanding a new workforce to address our current needs.
Thank you. And you are absolutely right that there is a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and interest in scratch cooking everywhere that I go, but it does require the equipment, the capacity, and as you say, the sort of training and support to labor. One of the things that we'll be doing, I talked briefly before about the Healthier School for Foods Incentives program. One of the critical aspects of that will be, again, providing school nutrition professionals with the support they need to improve and innovate around school meals. So that could certainly include things like training and resources for school food service professionals around scratch cooking.
Thank you so much. And I am thrilled to hear you speak about these programs this way, because I've seen them work and I've seen the impact they have on schools and local communities. Madam Chair, with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Hayes. I now recognize Representative Thompson. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thank you for this hearing. Administrator Long, thank you for being with us today. I represent Pennsylvania's 15th Congressional District. Covers 14 counties, nearly 25% of the landmass of Pennsylvania. And through this area, I represent many dairy farms and have been a strong advocate for them and continue to find ways to bring dairy varieties back into school lunches. As you know, milk is the #1 source of 9 essential nutrients in young Americans' diets and provides multiple health benefits, including better bone health, lower blood pressure, reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, and type 2 diabetes. And no other beverage comes close to this level of natural nutritional value. However, from 2014 to 2016, schools served 213 million fewer half pints of milk, despite the fact public school enrollment was growing. Now, given the nutritional value of milk and the fact young minds need to be well nourished to perform at their best, this is a cause for concern. In December of 2018, USDA announced a final rule to broaden milk options in the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program by allowing schools to offer flavored, low-fat, 1% milk rather than only fat-free milk. While I was extremely pleased to see this, we need to keep pushing forward. That's why I've introduced HR 1861, the Bipartisan Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act, which builds off of USDA's 2018 guidance and allows schools that participate in the school lunch program to serve whole milk as an option. Now, this bill, which has nearly 100 co-sponsors, bipartisan bill, will bolster whole milk consumption for our children, benefiting them nutritionally, throughout the nation and quite frankly, support our rural economy. And a more robust rural economy obviously supports our school districts. So it's a win-win. So Ms. Long, what do you believe are the next steps to ensure schools continue to provide more milk choices for students, including whole milk?
Well, thank you, Congressman. And I couldn't agree more that milk is a nutrient-dense food that can play a tremendously important role in children's diet. It's the only food that is specifically required as part of the National School Lunch Program. You mentioned the issue of the availability and the sort of back and forth over time on the availability of flavor milk. And I just want to point out that earlier this year we did issue an interim a rule for school meals that continues to allow both flavored milk in both non-fat and low-fat forms. And so that is currently an option that is available to schools. It is true that that milk offered in schools must be low-fat or non-fat, and that is simply because that is the clear guidance from the dietary guidelines.
And thank you. I have one more question. Kind of actually builds on the statement you made. The interim rule on meal patterns essentially does codify the Trump administration's rule relating to milk, whole grains, and sodium. And yet, despite everyone actually utilizing this program and asking for simple stability in the program, USDA is working on new updated regulations. So what guarantees can you provide that these rules will be cost neutral to the programs, have attainable standards, provide flexibility so entities can actually serve food the students will actually eat? So I like to say it doesn't matter what we set the standards at. If our youth will not eat the food, it is not nutritional. And quite frankly, and assurances that we won't create extra layers of paperwork or other administrative burdens and bureaucracy.
Well, I know from personal experience that school meal nutrition standards, number one, can work. We have strong evidence from the last major update that the nutritional quality of school meals improved considerably in the period after the implementation of standards. Secondly, I know from personal experience that they have to be workable and durable to be effective. Schools have to be able to implement them. So those are the principles that we will be standing by as we develop the new proposed rules. We have been engaged in extensive stakeholder discussions as we're preparing the proposed rule. And of course, it is a proposed rule. So school nutrition program operators, parents, families, communities, everyone with a stake in this will have the opportunity to comment, and I can assure you that we take those comments extremely seriously, and they will be reflected in a final rule.
Well, very good. Well, thank you so much. And Madam Chair, thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Representative. Next, I recognize Representative Leger Fernandez. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you so much, Chair Bonamici and Administrator Long, for joining us today. I am so pleased to hear much of your testimony and the answers to the questions from my fellow colleagues. I too have dairy farmers in my district, so I thank the representative for those questions. I want to talk to you about nutrition issues facing my constituents, but I'm going to start with issues around Native American, because 1/4 of my constituents are Native American. And I'm actually told that there's no word for hunger or poverty in Keres or other indigenous languages, because no one would be left hungry or without food or what they need to survive. But right now, currently, Native Americans have some of the highest rates of food insecurity and the highest rates of diabetes. So last fall, when the United States Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, just visited my district, we brought him together with community members from Okewinge Pueblo, and we talked about targeting the most vulnerable families to make sure they had access to nutrition programs. He highlighted the need to make sure that children were well fed so they could begin to learn. We all know all of that, right? But I am reintroducing the Tribal Nutrition Improvement Act to make sure tribes can administer directly food assistance programs. Administrator Long, do you support the implementation of a pilot program to allow tribes to administer their own food assistance programs?
Well, Congressman, I know that our FNS staff has engaged with yours quite a bit over the bill, and you know, I will start with the principle that we are absolutely committed to furthering tribal sovereignty and self-determination across all of our programs, and you know, certainly the goal is to provide tribes with what they need to operate to support their members, and certainly a pilot program that would help us explore the best path forward to that goal is something we would be absolutely happy to engage with you on further.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I'm going to address an issue that is, I'm going to talk about it in the terms of the tribal context, but I think it applies in all rural areas. And that is the reimbursement rate. Many of the schools serving Native students are in remote areas, hours from the nearest distribution center, and schools are forced to purchase foods that travel long distance because it's too expensive to pay for fresh produce delivered in refrigerated trucks. So my legislation would allow an increase for reimbursement rates to be for Bureau-funded schools. And I was wanting to know if you would agree with that, the importance that food assistance programs are affordable and easily accessible to those who need them.
Well, I think it's easy to agree that school nutrition programs ought to be affordable and easy to access. I will also point out, because folks don't always recognize this, that the reimbursement rate is intended to cover not only the food, but the labor and the administration. And in most school districts, school nutrition programs are expected to be self-financing. I think I mentioned in my opening statement that these programs operate on very small margins. So, the reimbursement rate is tremendously important. Making changes to that is ultimately Congress's purview. But again, it is important that these programs be properly resourced.
And I want to pick up on the time remaining to me about the importance of purchasing that fresh produce, meat, and dairy locally, because not only does it assist with supply chain issues, as was recently discussed, it also bolsters the local economies. I hear the same from my local farmers and ranchers and dairy about the importance of it. Can you describe how USDA allows and incentivizes purchasing locally produce and other goods?
Well, probably the largest way in that we do that is through both our Farm to School program grants, which provide the infrastructure for supporting local purchasing and agricultural education. We also do, within the programs, have something called a local purchasing preference, which allows schools to prefer local products in their purchasing. And we would be happy, again, to talk with you and your team about how we can utilize that and strengthen it going forward.
Yes, I look forward to building some of that in. We're already starting to work on the Farm Bill. And with that, Madam Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Ledger-Fernandez. Next, I recognize Representative Fitzgerald. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mrs. Long, as representative from Wisconsin, America's Dairyland, concerned that too stringent standards on milk and sodium could effectively remove foods like cheese from the school lunch program. What's the status of the department's meal pattern rule, and what will the sodium limit for schools be?
Thank you for your question, Congressman. So in terms of the status of school meal rules, we are currently operating under a rule that we published earlier this year that will be in place for the next 2 school years that sets standards for sodium, which you asked about, that are for this coming year are similar to what was in place before the pandemic. And we are working, as I said in my opening statement, on a longer-term update of the school meals standards that, with the intent that would come into place after the next 2 school years. That will consider everything from sodium, every aspect of the program, and it will be a proposed rule and open to public comment.
So in regards to that, if the levels of sodium are found to be not in line with what the standards would be, what could you do about that, or how would you address that so they'd be able to work with those that are not just cheese producers, but other different commodities that are part of the school lunches.
Yeah, that raises a really important point. We see our role not only as sort of setting the rules and the standards, but providing the support that's needed for the rules to be achievable at the local school level. We have been engaging extensively with school program operators and industry around these issues, and we have talked a lot about sodium. So we are listening to to manufacturers in terms of the kind of lead time they need, the kind of challenges they're facing, what particular products might be more and less challenging. We're talking to school program operators about the kind of training they need, the kind of equipment they might need to move more towards scratch cooking, because that can be a tool to reduce sodium. As I've said before, we know that standards need to be workable and durable in the school context to make an impact. So that is absolutely the goal that we're moving toward.
The last question I have is more anecdotal, but certainly something that you hear all the time, and that is the amount of waste associated with school lunches. Frustrating for people when they're either working a lunchroom or serving in a lunchroom to see just, full trays of food scraped into the garbage as they walk out. Is that something that the Department of Ag, is there any way of monitoring that or knowing whether or not, there's a real relationship between nutrition and certainly, what kids want and them instead of just discarding this food?
Yeah, well, certainly there's too much waste in the food system at every point, and there is waste in schools. That's a fact. Now, I will say that the research shows, the research really doesn't support the idea that healthier meals are wasted more. In fact, our research shows the opposite, that kids actually participate more in schools that have strong meal standards. But we certainly do focus our thinking and our technical assistance around reducing waste. We share with schools best practices, things like doing taste tests with the kids so that they're getting served things that they like and will eat instead of a throwaway. Again, I keep singing the praises of farm to school programs, but we've definitely heard that when kids are engaged in things like school gardens or greenhouses and they learn about a particular item, they're much more likely to try it in a school food program. So, we recognize that waste is always a challenge, and we do our very best to try to support schools and share, best practices and resources for reducing waste.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative. Next, I recognize the Chairman of the full committee, Representative Scott. You're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Long, for being with us today. Just this week, I joined Ranking Member Fox in announcing an agreement to provide extended and additional flexibilities and assistance with our nutrition programs through the next school year. It's my hope that this proposal will pass the House today and swiftly pass the Senate. Can you talk a little bit about why the bill is so important?
I would be happy to do that, and thank you, Chairman Scott, for your leadership. As I said in my opening statement, schools are still facing very significant financial and operational challenges, and we appreciate that this bill would provide both financial and operational support, reimbursement rate increases for school meals as well as for childcare, and would also provide USDA with stronger waiver authority to help provide that operational support. So we think this is an extremely important step to help support them in the coming year, where they will continue to face significant transitional challenges as we move back to standard program operations.
And what would happen to some of the summer programs if we did not pass legislation?
Probably the most important thing is communities will be more limited as to where they can operate programs. With the national waiver authority that this bill would provide, we would be able to provide communities more flexibility to operate programs wherever they see a need.
And did you see an increase in ability to serve children nutritious meals after the Coronavirus Relief Act passed, the Families First bill passed?
Well, I think it's clear that without the support from Congress to provide, again, the substantial financial and operational flexibilities we were able to provide, schools would not have been able to do what they did, which was to keep nutritious meals, keep providing nutritious meals to families, even under the most extraordinary circumstances. So yes, those measures were absolutely essential.
Thank you. I'm in strong support of USDA's cross-government coordination with the Department of Health and Human Services, Food and Drug Administration, and the White House to rapidly transport safe specialty formulas into the country for babies with special medical needs through Operation Fly Formula. The shortage has highlighted the need for governmental agencies to work together, and I want to make sure that FNS is committed to doing so, given its critical role in infant and child nutrition. So can you tell me what steps you're taking to promote greater collaboration within the government in order to ensure coordinated response to future recalls and supply disruptions?
Yeah, absolutely. We have been engaged from the very outset in an all-of-government effort to address the infant formula shortage. Our particular role there is ensuring the access to formula to WIC families. We were in contact with FDA from the very beginning, and within 24 hours after the recall was announced, we announced the availability of waivers and flexibilities to allow WIC participants to exchange formula, to obtain other formula, and within 3 days, over 100 waivers had been provided. We continue to engage with FDA, HHS, and other federal partners on literally a daily, sometimes around-the-clock basis to address the challenge, and we'll certainly be working on putting structures in place to avert this kind of issue in the future.
Is there any effort to stockpile formula so if a disruption occurred, we'd have more than tomorrow afternoon to respond to it?
Well, I would say at this point we are extremely focused on the acute issue at hand, which is increasing formula supply through production and importation, and again, getting it in the hands of WIC families. But there is clearly a need and an intention by the administration to take a careful look at everything to do with this crisis and consider appropriate steps to avert such a thing in the future.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you about a policy that FNS rescinded for the child and adult care food program and summer program. Up until last year, you allowed state agencies to collect racial and ethnic data just by looking at participants. Can you explain why FNS decided to rescind this policy and what you're doing now to ensure equity in programs?
Yes, we rescinded the policy because it was just frankly inappropriate for program operators to be the ones to be determining someone's race or ethnicity by simply looking at it. So that, again, looking at that person, sorry. So that policy, as you mentioned, has been rescinded, and we are working closely with our program operators to come up with alternative ways to provide accurate data on race and ethnicity to ensure equal access to our programs.
Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do not see any other subcommittee members on the platform, and it's my understanding there are none in the hearing room. So I now recognize Representative Omar for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Administrator Long, for being here with us today. I'm actually a former community nutrition educator, so it's nice to have you with us and to hear directly from someone who has extensive experience implementing viral nutrition initiatives. To my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who might not be aware of these staggering statistics, right now more than 38 million people, including 12 million children, are food insecure in the United States. To put that in perspective, that is nearly 1 in 3 Black children, 1 in 4 Latino children, 6% of Asian Americans, and 19% of Pacific Islanders, and 2.1 million rural households, all living with food insecurity. That is unacceptable. No child in the wealthiest country in the world should be going to sleep hungry. At the beginning of the pandemic, as schools were closing their doors, my mind went to the 30 million kids who rely on school meals for their food every day. Immediately, I was able to draft with the help of the committee and introduce the Meals Act, which granted waivers allowing districts to do whatever it takes to provide universal school meals in the hopes of preventing massive hunger crisis. Thankfully, my bill was included in the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and the waivers became law. In August 2020, when those waivers were expiring, we were able to work with our colleagues to push for those waivers to be extended, and luckily we were able to secure that. This month, we found ourselves in a similar place as families look to us to see if we are able to extend those meal waivers before they expire at the end of the month. Thankfully, today we will be voting on a bill to do just that. But we can't stop there. We need permanent solution. That's why one of the first bills I introduced after I was sworn in was the Universal School Meals Program. So my question, Administrator Long, is if you are able to speak more to finding a permanent solution to the problem of child hunger and the potential benefits of a universal school meals program.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman, for your leadership in supporting these programs. We certainly a universal approach is something that has, would be a significant change with statutory and funding implications, and ultimately is in the hands of Congress. But I can say that we certainly have seen the benefits of universal programs, not only in these past 2 years as a part of the pandemic response, but we've had longer experience with the Community Eligibility Program, which allows universal programs to operate. It is targeted towards lower income communities, but it allows them to operate universal feeding programs, and they receive their funding based on a formula rather than on a individual means tested approach. We have seen great benefits associated with community eligibility. We hear from every corner, parents, teachers, principals, community members, how valuable the program is in increasing participation, reducing stigma, and just really rallying the community around school meals. So we would certainly be happy to work with you and your colleagues moving forward on what the future for school meals should look like.
Thank you. And I've traveled and have done extensive meetings with administrators in my district, and have been to schools and have heard a lot of those success stories directly. So thank you for amplifying that. Could you also expand on the ways that the traditional funding model for school meals stigmatizes the children who receive those meals, as you've just alluded to that stigma?
Certainly. Well, some of the things we hear are that, one of the issues that I'm sure many of you are aware of is this sort of notion that sometimes children will appear at school without the ability to purchase a school meal, and yet they're not certified for free or reduced price meals for whatever reason. The family didn't understand the application or something to that effect. And they're not able to obtain a meal, or they're provided an alternative meal. We've worked really, really hard to encourage schools to support kids, provide meals where they can, be very clear about policies to avoid exactly that kind of stigma, which no child should have to experience in their school day.
Yeah, really appreciate that. I always say we have to feed the bellies before we can feed the brains. And as a country that has the resources, we should prioritize our children, their well-being, their development, their health, and their ability to get an education to get ahead. So thank you so much. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. I see no other members on the platform, and it's my understanding there are none in the committee room. I want to remind my colleagues that pursuant to committee practice, materials for submission to the hearing record must be submitted to the committee clerk within 14 days following the last day of the hearing. So by close of business on July 7th, 2022, preferably in Microsoft Word format. The materials submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. Only a member of the subcommittee or an invited witness may submit materials for inclusion in the hearing record. Documents are limited to 50 pages each. Documents longer than 50 pages will be incorporated into the record via an internet link that you must provide to the committee clerk within the required time frame. But please recognize that in the future, the link may no longer work. Pursuant to House rules and regulations, items for the record should be submitted to the clerk electronically by emailing submissions to edandlabor.hearings@mail.house.gov. I want to thank Administrator Long for participating today. Members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for you, and we ask that you please respond to those questions in writing. The hearing record will remain open for 14 days to receive those responses. I also remind my colleagues that pursuant to committee practice, witness questions for the hearing record must be submitted to the majority committee staff or committee clerk within 7 days. The questions submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. I'm now going to move to closing statements, and I also note somebody needs to mute their microphone. I see Ranking Member Fulcher. I do not see Ranking Member Fulcher, but I see you are logged on. Ranking Member Fulcher, do you have a closing statement? Apparently not. Okay, I'm going to recognize myself for the purpose of, is Ranking Member Fulcher, were you going to make a closing statement? No? Okay, I recognize myself for the purpose of making a closing statement. Administrator Long, thank you again for your testimony today. Together, the Biden-Harris administration and Congress have expanded access to child nutrition programs that have made a meaningful difference in our effort to eliminate child hunger. In the early weeks of the pandemic, 1 in 3 households with children struggled to put food on the table. But from January to April of 2021, thanks to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, food shortages in households with children fell by 42%. And since then, Congress, and especially this committee, has continued to work for children to have access to the nutritious food they need to learn and grow. Although the progress we have made is important, you have made clear that we have much more work to do. Later today, I look forward to helping to pass the bipartisan, bicameral Keep Kids Fed Act so schools can continue serving children healthy meals. The Biden-Harris administration has been an important partner in our work to make sure that no one goes hungry in the United States. The White House is convening a conference on hunger, nutrition, and health in September. We heard a little bit about that today. It will mark another essential milestone to further collaborate on delivering solutions for American families. As chair of this subcommittee, I remain committed to working with my colleagues to pass a comprehensive reauthorization of child nutrition programs. As I said earlier, if we want to eliminate child hunger, we must provide sustained investment. Reauthorization is long overdue for our schools, our childcare providers, WIC clinics, and all the students and people these institutions serve. Thank you again, Administrator Long, for all you do for our nation's children and family, and I look forward to our continued work together. If there is no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.